You may hear audio from my phone, which has the Canucks game on right now. So I am paying attention to hockey tonight. The Leafs doing their best and losing in Montreal. There's no shame in that. Good game for Toronto. You can't win them all, as they say. I'm gonna turn this down. Just realizing it's gonna be distracting, so I'll leave it on, but I'll turn the sound off. Now, there's a few different angles I'm approaching this with or from. Um, I might as well start with the stuff that you're gonna get out of the way, anyways, because Philly, honestly, is known more for this. And the funny thing is, the fighting angle with Philly is played out right now. Um, but Broad Street Bullies is the phrase that's been used to describe Philly for years. Philly fans are known as, let's just say, the city of brotherly love. I think that was an ironic name. I don't know that it was necessarily a genuine name that somebody went into a Philadelphia sports crowd and went, man, these are really loving people. Dude, you're bleeding from the head. I know. I'm aware where I'm bleeding from. What loving people. Um, it is, and there are other cities where I would be scared of wearing an opposing jersey in the crowd, but Philly in the right with the right game with the right jersey, I'm thinking Pittsburgh. I'd be curious as to how long I'd live. Um, all right, it wouldn't kill me, but I do. Philly is one of those cities. And I know I cheer for Boston, and before anybody says anything, I know these guys are bad too. I get it. Um, I've had more than one person say that for a Boston fan, I'm a decent person compared to most Boston fans. Um, all right. The Philadelphia Flyers were the first expansion team to win the Stanley Cup, capturing consecutive titles in 1974 and 75. Coached by future Hall of Famer Fred Shero, the team's modus operandi was a style of play based on physical intimidation. Infamously, the squad was nicknamed the Broad Street Bullies. Upon entry into the NHL, Philadelphia faced its 1967 expansion cousins, St. Louis, in the playoffs in the first two seasons of the 12-team era. The Blues came away victorious both times. Believing their inferior physical play was their downfall, the Flyers began building a team around skaters who played with more aggression. In the 1969 amateur draft, Philadelphia selected Dave Schultz in the fifth round and Don Selesky in the sixth round. 1 year later, the team made Bob Kelly a third round selection. Then in 1972, they made a trade with St. Louis for Andre Dupont. These players were among the core of the Broad Street Bullies, living up to their moniker by employing their pugilistic tactics on a nightly basis. Opposing players visiting the Spectrum were known to contract a psychological ailment known as the Philly flu, informally defined as the fear of skating onto the ice in preparation for the cross-checks, high sticks, elbows, and punches that would be delivered by their hosts. Schultz, known as the Hammer, was the main enforcer. In 1974-75, he set an NHL single season record, collecting 472 penalty minutes. No one's ever going to equal that. It's very rare now to see a guy pass 200 penalty minutes, much less 400. Over his career, Schultz dropped the gloves, often versus fellow fighters Gary Howitt of the Islanders, Terry O'Reilly of the Bruins, and Harold Snepsts of the Canucks. Andre Moose Dupont was no stranger to the penalty box, finishing second in the league to Schultz in penalty minutes in the latter player's record-setting year. His only career overtime goal eliminated the Maple Leafs in the 1975 quarterfinals. On defense, the Flyers' most feared combatant was Ed Van Impe. His punishing body check on Soviet forward Valery Kharlamov in an exhibition game in 1976 left the star motionless for several minutes. The incensed Red Army team briefly left the ice in protest over the unpenalized hit. Philadelphia also had players whose talents went beyond what they could do with their fists. Captain Bobby Clarke was an outstanding two-way player and three-time MVP. Goaltender Bernie Parent uh, backstopped the team goal to both of their championships, winning the Conn Smythe Trophy both times. That's very impressive. But the Broad Street Bullies will forever be known as the team that used brawn rather than skill as their primary method of winning games. And I said get that out of the way because honestly, when you look at this team, the Broad Street Bullies, that's like 40 years ago now. And it's in magazines and it's talked about quite a bit. And it honestly, to me, it's been so long since the Broad Street Bullies. I'm going to touch on it because it's the history of the Flyers. That's where they won their 2 Stanley Cups, but there's more to it than that. There's a feud to it, large feud. Eric Lindros, who's gone into the Hall. This is November 19th of 2016, and this is the year that Eric Lindros has finally got into the Hall of Fame. And I'm torn on whether or not I think Lindros belongs there. And I watched hockey his entire career, and I don't know. I'm on the fence as to whether or not Lindros belongs in the same hall as Yzerman. That's my thing. I think that making it to Hall of Fame, I don't know. I don't know that I'd want it like baseball, where it's virtually impossible for some guys to get in there who belong there. But man, it is. And then my thought is, well, if you're going to put in Lindros, if you're going to argue that he did a lot and he's famous, then Tiger Williams should be there. And I don't mean that as a joke. Tiger Williams, one of the most famous hockey players, not in the Hall of Fame, and it's kind of weird. Okay, so she's messaging me on, it's coming up on both phones? That's weird. Yep, that's coming up on both phones. Okay, she's downstairs. Why is she messaging me? Why are you messaging me from downstairs? Oh, okay. All right. It's very important. It's a meme. So just making sure it wasn't help me. The kids have revolted. I've been tied to the chair. She's able to text that out to me. That would be awesome. All right. Eric Lindros versus Bobby Clarke. On paper, it promised to be a perfect relationship between a Hall of Famer and a supposed future Hall of Famer, now a Hall of Famer. While relations between Flyers GM Bob Clarke and Eric Lindros started off okay, it took only a few years before the association began to show cracks. After a mega trade from Quebec to the Flyers in 1992, Lindros started to bring Philadelphia back to respectability. He won his first and only MVP in the lockout-shortened 94-95 campaign, while the Flyers ended a 5-year playoff drought. Soon after, injuries began to plague Lindros, headlined by a series of concussions that unofficially originated in a game where Pittsburgh's Darius Kasparaitis leveled him just after the 1998 Winter Olympics. Oh, Kasparaitis, the careers you ended. The injury that really drove a wedge between Clarke and Lindros, however, occurred April 1st, 1999, when the Big E sustained a collapsed lung due to a hit by Nashville defenseman Bob Boughner, who was a tough customer. Very tough. According to Clarke, Lindros' parents, Carl and Bonnie, later accused the GM of allowing their son to fly back to Philadelphia after his release from the Nashville hospital, a risky proposition due to changes in cabin pressure. Eric brings all the problems on himself, Clarke said at the time. It's pretty hard to believe our training staff wouldn't treat him properly or that I put him on a plane to try to kill him. This kind of stuff never ends and is hard on a club. It's disruptive. You can't tell me a 27-year-old man could have his dad speaking for him, taking him to the doctor, showing up in the locker room after an injury. You do that to a 14-year-old boy and he's embarrassed. Lindros survived, but the other problems continued. Over his 9 years with the Flyers, he sustained an estimated 6 concussions. The last and most famous one in 2000 completely ended his relationship with Clarke and the Flyers. In Game 7 of the 2000 Eastern Conference Final, Lindros was knocked unconscious on a massive hit by New Jersey's Scott Stevens. Clean hit. Clean hit. And it is because of the concussions Lindros had, that did it. And that Stevens hit now would not be considered a clean hit. So I'm using that just as an example of how what we consider a clean hit right now is going to change, and what was considered a clean hit back then changed. The Devils completed a 3-game comeback with a win in that contest, and Lindros was on his way out the door. Over the years, there were way too many controversies, Clarke said before trading Lindros to the Rangers, August 20th, 2001, for Jan Hlavac, Kim Janssen, Pavel Brendel, and a third-rounder. That's just awful. He gets hit by Stevens, and his dad and his butler are running around the locker room. Bobby Clark, where Clark loses me as an authority figure in hockey, is that with Lindros, he didn't take the concussion seriously. He felt Eric should just get up and just skate it off, and he felt he was being a whiner. Remember his attitude in press conferences and just in general was that Lindros is whining. He should just get out there and play. And this goes back to the first bit I'm reading there from the Broad Street Bullies. Concussions common, not diagnosed back then. Concussions later on diagnosed. Bobby Clark, being from the age before that, believed the concussions were nothing. It was no big deal. So he got his bell rung. Get him back on the ice. What do you mean he won't get back on the ice? This seemed to be his attitude. I remember when Roger Nielsen was diagnosed with cancer, and he replaced Roger Nielsen behind the bench as the coach right away. He fired him. And then when the press and fans were upset, he goes, "What? It's not my fault he got cancer." And that really is, in essence, the issue with Bobby Clark. He never seemed to understand that people get hurt and things happen, and you don't just deny them a living for it. And the trading of Lindros, he didn't really get anything back. Janssen, half decent defenseman. Brendel, completely useless. And who else was it? Jan Lavach. I someday when a brain aneurysm goes off and is Canuck related, it's going to have Jan Lavach's name on it. He was awful. He was a horrible hockey player. When Clark got rid of Lindros, it was just a dump. It was just, I want to get rid of this guy. He's got to go. And that's how he was as a GM. And ultimately, that's why the Flyers couldn't get over the hump. Lindros never really had public criticism for Clark. Instead, he referred to the difficulty in abstract terms. There was a tremendous amount of support in Philadelphia, Lindros said at his introductory press conference with the Rangers. Come playoff time, that city was rocking. Even through the many highs and lows, there was always support. I've got nothing but good things to take away from what occurred as far as the players and the fans. That certainly overrides anything that took place with management. I didn't like Lindros. I was not a Lindros fan. But I absolutely never for a moment said, this guy's making up these concussions. This guy's a whiner. He's a baby. No. You don't make up concussions. Because, ultimately, a hockey player wants to play. You're signed to a contract. You want to play hockey. That's your primary, not just your job, that's your primary focus. That's how you got to where you are. Lindros, as much as I didn't like him, it's tons of heart. Tons of heart. He really played all out, which is part of the reason why his career was shortened. But it could be argued during 94-95 and during the following season that he was the most dominant physical player in hockey. And then the concussions started to take over slowly, and then they cascaded, and by the time he got to the Rangers, he was broken. He had some good seasons of hockey after that, but he was not the same player. And by the time he got to play, his turns with Toronto and Dallas, he was a shell of his former self. And I put a lot of that on Bobby Clark trying to force him back when he wasn't ready. I never understood that. Never understood that. Forcing a guy back before he's ready. But again, that was Bobby Clark's mentality. And then, of course, Holmgren came in, and his mentality was, bye, everybody. Every free agent comes to us. All right, here's the debates. The LCB line versus the Legion of Doom. Wayne Fish writes for one side. Ken Campbell writes for the other. Wayne Fish is for the LCB line. Crowning the Philadelphia Flyers' best all-time offensive line just might be as easy as counting to 1, 2, 3. 1 Stanley Cup, 2 Hall of Famers, 3 Hart trophies. Those legendary numbers alone lift the legendary LCB line of Reggie Leach, Bobby Clark, and Bill Barber just ahead of the touted Legion of Doom, which was Eric Lindros, John LeClair, and Michael Renberg, for top honors. Clark's crew dominated much of the time in the late 70s, winning the Cup in 1975, falling to a dynasty in the making in Montreal in 76, and taking another on-the-rise New York Islanders team to 6 games in 1980. Along the way, Clark garnered 3 MVP awards and established himself as the greatest player in team history. Barber, uh, who followed Clark into the Hall of Fame. I don't know why there's another comma in there. Barber, who followed Clark into the Hall of Fame, set team records for goals with 420 and is second in playoff goals with 53, one behind Rick McLeish. And Leach still holds the record for most goals in a single season with 61 and one playoff, 19, both set in 75-76. Although Lindros' unit ran roughshod through the NHL in the late 1990s, it never won a title and only got to the final once, suffering a sweep by Detroit in 97. Lindros did win the Hart in the lockout-shortened 94-95 season and recently gained Hall of Fame entry. For sheer power and intimidation, the Legion ranks right up among the very best. But in the final analysis, the LCB line was far more diversified and successful. The important numbers just add up. Now the other side, in favor of the Legion of Doom line. They checked in at 18 feet 9 inches and weighed 708 pounds, and by the time they were at the height of their powers, the members of the Legion of Doom made a threesome that was among the scariest trio of beasts the game has ever seen. Eric Lindros between John LeClair and Michael Renberg wasn't just a line, it was a skyscraper, with its own area code, and it might have had the greatest moniker in the history of the game. One that was coined by the teammate Jim Montgomery and made a household name by Flyers play-by-play man Gene Hart. What made the Legion of Doom so dominant was they had an ability to play the game any way their opponents wanted to play it. Obviously, they had the wherewithal to battle in the trenches, but unlike most big men at the time, they could get around the ice with a lot of speed and had 3 sweet set of mitts. As a member of the line, LeClair was a 2-time 50-goal scorer. Renberg recorded 3 straight 20-goal seasons, and Lindros, who won the Hart Trophy in 94-95, had equivalent of 3 100-point seasons. If not for the lockout in 94-95 and an injury that cost him 30 games in 96-97, Lindros would have had 125 points in those seasons rather than the 70 and 79 he posted. In the end, it was injuries to Lindros and Renberg that did the Legion of Doom in. But at a time when lines don't stay together, the Legion of Doom was a 3-year supernova. The game has never seen anything like it. All right, goaltenders. You can't talk about Philly and you look at the current team. And I just went through the Philadelphia Flyers list. Steve Mason and Michael Neuwirth are the current goaltenders. Brian Boucher, Antero Niedermaki, Roman Cicmanek, Marty Biron, Ilya Bryzgalov, Ray Emery, Sergei Bobrovsky, Mike Layton, and Robert Esche are guys who I've watched come and go in the Philly Nets who had varying levels of success and varying pressure, and were either viewed as being fantastic or whatever. I see in the list here Dominic Rousseau is another one that crosses my mind, although that was further back. I'm trying not to go too far back. The fact that the Flyers currently are looking at potentially parting ways with both of their goalies after all those names, as I said, have come and gone, and at the time that those goalies went, they were considered the reason. Okay, well, now we fixed our goaltending. Now we're going to move forward. And it seems like Philadelphia is always fixing its goaltending. Always. And at some point, you have to look at these goaltenders and say, okay, there's one or two things that's happened in Philly. One, goaltenders have been somewhat overrated. And Cicmanek comes to mind, although Cicmanek put up tremendous regular season numbers. Two, the eye for skill is not great in Philly. Losing Bobrovsky and bringing in Mason was a subtraction. I don't see any way around that. Bobrovsky's been very good in Columbus. He's had some downtimes, but compared to Mason, it really isn't a comparison. And Michael Neuwirth, who I think is a very good goaltender, is putting up very bad numbers for Philly this year. And I honestly look at the numbers being put up by their goaltenders and I say, okay, they've got a very young defense. So, is this a matter of their save percentages being down because the shots are from right in front of the net? This is something that doesn't get measured by traditional stats, of course, which is where did the shots come from that beat them? And, Edmonton's another case of this. Toronto's another case of this. when your defense isn't very good and it's allowing shots from really sweet spots on the ice, your goaltender save percentage is probably going to suck. Their goals against is probably going to suck because they're facing the shots from close in, probably through a screen, rather than the opposing goalie is probably facing a lot of shots from the perimeter, a lot of shots from the back, and defensemen are making sure they can see the puck. Philly's gone through a lot of goaltenders. A lot. And if they decide to part ways with both goalies at the end of this season, I don't know where you go from there. I don't know where Philly would turn, because I remember Philly making it to the Stanley Cup Finals not too long ago, and their goaltenders weren't really all that great. And there was a lot of talk at the time of how, oh, now we're seeing an NHL where you don't have to have a star goaltender. You can just have a couple of whoever's, and as long as your team's good, you can win, which works great, except it's bullshit. Philly went on a good run. They made it to the final, and that was in 2010. They made it to the final, and then they didn't. They lost in the first round the next 2 years. They were out of the playoffs twice in the next 4 years after that, and they've lost in the first round the other two. So while at the time there was a point of view of, oh no, they lost the conference semifinal. Sorry, they lost in the second round both years after that final. Sorry, Philly fans. Because conference semifinal. Doy. And now they've lost the last 2 times they made the playoffs in the first round. You can't put it all in the goaltenders. You just can't. Now, Steve Mason's allowed some bad goals, and Michael Neuwirth is inconsistent. There's a reason he's bounced around the league the last 2 years. But where do you go? Who do you have? Who do you look at if you're a Philly fan right now and say, okay, we're set? Stallers? Maybe? But when? When does that move happen? I want to say there's another one I'm looking for here. Yeah, there's Stallers. I know there's another one I'm thinking of. There's another prospect I'm thinking of, and you guys will definitely mention it in the comments. There's Soderstrom, or Sandstrom, Felix Sandstrom, I believe is a goaltender for them as well. But do you go young? Is that what Philly does? It's rough. It's rough to watch a team. Philly's not out of it. I mean, they're not completely out of it right now. But they're teetering on it. They are definitely teetering on it. Philly, yeah, everything in terms of offense is dominated by the LOD and not the LOD. Sorry. Sorry, tired. No, the LOD's in there too. Games played: Bobby Clark 1144, Bill Barber 903. Brian Propp 790, Chris Therian surprisingly fourth with 753. Very good career, very unspectacular. People outside of Philly probably aren't going to remember Chris Therian very well. Joe Watson 746, Rick McLeish 741, Bob Kelly 741, Eric Desjardins 738, Gary Dornhofer 725, and Simon Gagne 691. Goals: Bill Barber 420. Brian Propp 369, Tim Kerr 363, and Propp and Kerr were two of my favorite guys in the 80s. I loved those guys. I did not like the Flyers, but I loved Propp and Kerr. Bobby Clark 358, John LeClair 333, Rick McLeish 328, Reggie Leach 306, Eric Lindros 290, Simon Gagne 264, Rod Brindamore 235. Assists, pretty much the same crew. Recchi gets in at fourth with assists with 395. Rod Brindamore is at seventh with 366. Claude Giroux is at eighth with 364. Mark Howe is in ninth with 342. And Pelle Eklund. And for people who follow the Eklund website, that's where he got his name from what I understand. 334 for him. Points, Bobby Clark leads away with 1,210. He had 852 assists. He's never going to get caught for that total in Philly. Bill Barber, 883. Brian Propp, 849. Rick McLeish, 697. Eric Lindros, 659. Tim Kerr, 650. John LeClaire, 643. Mark Recchi, 627. Rod Brindamore, 601. And Simone Gagne, 535. Now, power play goals, Tim Kerr, 145. Tim Kerr was one of the best power play forwards I've ever seen. I would put Kerr up there. I think Andrechuk's another one that I would probably have in there as well. And now people are going to be like, what about? There's lots. Just Tim Kerr really stood out as a power play specialist. Bill Barber, 104. Brian Propp, 103. John LeClaire, 102. Bobby Clark, 99. Rick McLeish, 98. Eric Lindros, 82. Reggie Leach, 79. Rod Brindamore, 75. And Recchi and Gagne are tied for 10th with 74. Shorthanded goals, Bobby Clark leads the way with 32. Bill Barber has 31. Dave Poulin has 27. Mark Howe, 24, which is surprising since he was a defenseman. Mike Richards, 23. Rick McLeish, 21. Brian Propp, 20. Rod Brindamore, 18. Jeff Carter, 12. Simone Gagne, Don Selesky, and Ilka Senesalo are tied for 10th with 11. So it's one of those interesting things to look at. This is interesting too. For wins now. The Flyers' number one guy is Ron Hextall with 240, then Bernie Parent with 232. Then you dive all the way down to 93 wins. In third place, Wayne Stevenson, followed by Bob Froese and Roman Cechmanek with 92 each in fourth place. And yes, it is Froese. I understand that it's pronounced differently with the guy in Toronto, but it was Bob Froese in the 80s when I watched him. Pelle Lindbergh, 87. Of course, Lindbergh doesn't count as could have been a savior and didn't work out because he died in a car crash. Pete Peters, 85. I thought about including Peters in my list, but by the time he came back to Philly, his career was done. Steve Mason with 82 is 8th on the all-time list. Doug Favell, 76, and Brian Boucher, 73. Shutouts. And you have Bernie Parent with 50, then Roman Cechmanek with 20, Ron Hextall, 18, Doug Favell, 16, Bob Froese, 12, Steve Mason, 11, Wade Stevenson, 10, John Van Beesbrook, 9, Brian Boucher, 8. Pelle Lindbergh has a 5-way tie for 10th place with 7. He's tied with Ilya Bryzgalov, Tommy Soderstrom, Robert Esche, and Marty Biron. So, goaltending. Philly is remembered by people who watched hockey in the 70s for their fisticuffs. For me, I see them as a team that's always been good, on the verge of being good enough to win a cup, and never quite getting there. They've made the finals twice since I started watching hockey personally, and I mean they've been close. They just haven't been able to get over the hump. Bill Barber, at the time that he was inducted, there was some feeling that it was too easy to get in the Hall of Fame. So it's kind of odd that Eric Lindros makes it into the Hall based on mainly his time in Philly. And the same argument can be made of Lindros that was made about Bill Barber 30 years ago. But regardless, they're both in the Hall. And Philly has a definite nucleus going here. I love the blue line that they're putting together. I love how young their forwards are, and I think if they do decide to change out their goaltending, I would hope that Ron Hextall, being a former goalie, being the GM now, being the man calling the shots, that he can recognize who the best option is. I could see Ben Bishop, but if Ben Bishop were to go from Tampa to Philly, it does not happen until the offseason. It does not happen at the trade deadline. It does not happen before the playoffs. But Bishop in Philly would make sense. Obviously, one of the other goalies that's been out there in rumors is Marc-Andre Fleury. It makes no sense to trade with Philly. I can't see Pittsburgh making that trade with Philly. Not right now. But the future's there for Philly, and I think, again, Stanley Cup, they've got to play better as a team, and they have to commit to a goaltender. This revolving door, you can't do it. You can't do it with a revolving door in net, and that's what they've been doing. They've been playing that revolving door game with goaltenders, and it is guaranteed to fail. It can't work. You need to pick a guy and commit to him. So, anyways, um, if you're a Flyers fan and you're just browsing through, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're looking for the Philly hat, I don't have a Philly hat. This is Stanley Cups to signify that Phillies won Stanley Cups as well. This is as close as I can get. Anyways, thanks for watching. This is, one of the first days of my new set, if we can call it that. But again, the acoustics seem to be better. I think visually it looks better. And I am very appreciative of you guys for sticking it out and for watching this. These history videos are longer, and that's how they're designed to be. And I appreciate you guys who do make it up till the end. But for now, I'm done for up till this point, and I will be paying attention to what happens with the Canucks game from here. They're home to the Hawks, so I don't have a whole lot of hope, but that's kind of part of being a fan. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to y'all again soon.